You probably already know how to make a double triple bracelet like this one or a single triple bracelet, but in this tutorial we will be using this very basic rainbow loom design to make a shark charm. And these two projects here were made with almost the same number of bands except for the tail area of the shark. But we were able to change the shape of the basic design from wide, like this area over here, to narrow, like these areas over here, by simply changing the way that our horizontal bands are placed on the loom. With the basic double triple and the single triple, these horizontal bands here that hold the bracelet together are single bands that are placed on 3 pins on a row. And that's how we get the standard shape of a double triple and a single triple. But when we make our action figures, we will be changing the way these horizontal bands are placed so we could change the shape of our project. We will be placing single bands like this, where our shape needs to be wider, and then we will be placing double loop bands in places like this where we need our shape to be narrower. All throughout this shark action figure, the bands have been placed differently to achieve this shape. This is a very important technique to learn when we are working with action figures. Jack Skellington here and Sally Skellington were made with almost the same number of bands in their upper body area. But you will see that Jack has more of a taper in his upper body, and Sally has less of that taper. This becomes all the more obvious when you are making the superheroes, because they have a more obvious taper, especially on their upper bodies. Like the Hulk here, he has a very narrow waist area and a very wide chest area. And we are able to change that with the way the bands are placed and also with the number of bands that were used. For Jack and Sally, we used all double bands for their upper bodies. But for the Hulk, we used 2 bands for this area, but from here to the shoulder area that broadens as we go up, we used 3 bands for each of these placements. So that gives us the different shapes in our action figures. When you make your action figures, you will be able to change the way they look simply by changing the way that the horizontal bands are placed and by the number of bands that you put in each portion of their body. You will be learning that important technique in this tutorial, and you will have this shark as your finished project. So let's get started. First, we have to make the fins and the tail for our shark. The tail is made up of 2 parts, the top part and the bottom part. And we will be making these separately, and then we will be connecting them on the loom. So let's start with the top part of the tail. I have already planned out my placement for the bands for the top part of the tail. Our loom is in the rectangular configuration with the arrow pointing downwards, and we will be placing the bands from the top going towards the bottom. And we start with a single black band on this top pin, and then a single gray band that goes from this pin to this pin, forming a diagonal, and then another single gray band from this pin to this pin, forming another diagonal. And then we have two bands, or what I call double bands, black double bands on these next pins, double gray bands on the next pins, and another double gray bands on these pins. Then we go back to single bands, a black single band in here, and then a gray single band that goes from this pin to this pin, forming a diagonal, and then another single gray band from this pin to this pin, forming another diagonal. And then we finish it off with a single black band on these pins and a single gray band from this pin to this pin, forming a diagonal. We cap that with a capping band that is looped 4 times to this pin over here. I'll have to turn my loom so it's easier to loop. Go 1, 2, 3, and 4. It is looped 4 times onto this pin over here, and that forms our capping band to hold the piece together. Now we place our horizontal bands that will hold our piece together and also determine the shape of the piece we are making. For these 2 pins over here, we will be placing a double looped band, which is simply a single band that is twisted and looped to itself to form a double looped band. Then we place that on these 2 pins over here. And then we do the same thing for these 3 pins over here. We form a double looped band. We just twist it and then fold it to itself to form a double loop band and place it on these pins over here. So I call these 2 horizontal bands double looped bands. Now here is something you might not have seen done on Rainbow Loom projects. Basically for the double triple you put a single band like this, but this is what I call a 1.5 looped band. I call it that way because I place a single band on these 3 pins, but then I twist it and then I loop it onto these 2 pins, on just these 2 pins. So it's first looped to these 3 pins, twisted, and then looped to these 2 pins. That is the reason why I call it a 1.5. And that is how we define the shape of our piece. The double bands here make it narrower. The 1.5 loop bands make it a little less narrower than the double loop bands, but definitely narrower than the single bands that we place in the basic double triple or single triple designs. So I think you're beginning to get the picture of how we modify the shape of our piece from wide to narrow. The placement of the bands, the tension on the bands is changed when we loop it the way we are doing with this piece. Now we are ready to loop our bands. No need to turn the loom around because the arrow is already pointing downwards. Now we dig out this gray band from this capping band. We dig it out and then we wiggle it out a bit and then put it on this forward pin over here. Then we dig out the black band, wiggle it out a bit, and then place it on this pin over here. We are looking for this teardrop shape so that we know that we are doing it right. If we are not getting this teardrop shape and these are tangled, something is wrong. You will have to retrace your steps. Now let's loop the next row of bands. Just dig them out and then put them to their forward pin, loop them to their forward pin. Dig it out, wiggle it out a bit, put it in the forward pin in a diagonal. Then dig out this black band, put it to this forward pin over here. Still getting our teardrop shaped. Now we go to the double bands that we have here. You dig this out, put it to its forward pin. Dig this out and put it to its forward pin. Then dig this out, put it to its forward pin. Okay, down to our last row of bands. These are single bands. Likewise, you dig this out, wiggle it out a bit, put it to this pin over here, forms a diagonal. You dig this out, then loop it, and then you dig this out and you loop it. So that is the looping for the top part of the tail. Now, because we have to make the lower part of the tail, we cannot finish this yet. So we have to secure it temporarily with toothpicks so we could get it out of the loom. So we secure the ends with a toothpick, then pull these out, and then pull these out, and then holding both ends together, we pull. Make sure you're holding it securely. You pull the rest of the piece out of the loom. And there we have the top part of the tail that will be on standby as we make the lower part of the tail. Now we will make the lower part of the tail. This is the design that I have mapped out for it. We start with a single black band, and then a single gray band that is placed from this pin to this pin in a diagonal, and then a single gray band that is placed from this pin to this pin. Then we get another black band, a single black band we put from this pin to that pin, and a single gray band that is put in a diagonal from this pin to that pin. And then we again cap this with a capping band that is a single black band that is looped to this pin 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it is looped to this pin 4 times. And then we place a double looped band on these 2 pins over here to hold the piece together. Then we're ready to loop. Over here. And again, because we need to connect the top part of the tail to the lower part of the tail on the loom, we have to again secure these end parts with toothpicks so we could get them out of the loom. Okay, so take them out of the loom. holding the two pieces, the end pieces together, pull out the entire piece from the loom. And there you have it. We have the bottom part of the tail and the top part of the tail, and we will now put this back on the loom so we could connect them together. Now let us work on connecting the two parts of the tail together. And we will be using the loom for that. First, we will be placing double gray bands on this section of the loom over here. It doesn't matter where you place them. And then this second pair of bands to this pins over here. And then we get the upper part of the tail with the black bands on the bottom. You could use your fingers to place it here on this pin over here, or you could use a hook, whichever is more convenient for you. I prefer using a hook for this. I just might help to put this sideways. Get this loops over here and then place them on this pin over here. Then replace the toothpick with a hook. Make sure you get all 4 loops. Okay. And then place them on this pin over here. Okay. So that is the top part of the tail. Now let's work on the lower part. Make sure that the black bands are on this side to match the black bands on this side. Replace the toothpick with a hook. And then place it on this pin over here. Okay. Then likewise, you have to be very careful. Replace the toothpick with the hook and place these loops on this pin. Make sure all of them get in there. So there you have it, the lower part of the tail and the upper part of the tail. It's on the loom, and we've placed 2 double bands, and we are now looping those 2 double bands onto the parts of the tail. We dig out the gray bands, wiggle them out a bit, and then loop. And then wiggle, dig for the next pair of bands, wiggle them out a bit, and then loop. And then we take that out of the loom, and there we have the tail for our shark. We have to set this aside for a while, so we have to once again secure the end loops with a toothpick and wait for the rest of the pieces to be made. Now onto the top fin. It will be very similar to how we made the top part of the tail, except for these row of bands over here. So we start with the double bands when we make the fin. 2 black bands, and then 2 gray bands, or what we call the double bands. And then another 2 gray bands. We move on to single bands, black single band, from this pin to that pin, a gray band in a diagonal from this pin to that pin, and then another gray band from this pin to that pin. And lastly, a black band from this pin to that pin, a gray band in a diagonal from this pin to that pin. We cap that with a capping band that is looped 4 times to this pin over here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. That will be our capping band for the top fin. Then we will be placing our horizontal bands to hold the piece together and to define the shape. It's a double looped band that goes on these pins over here, and another double looped band on these pins over here. We are now ready to loop the top fin. And then we will secure the ends with toothpicks again, so they'll be ready for attachment to the main body. Take them out of the pin. Hold them together, and then take the entire piece out of the loom. And that is the top fin for the shark. Now to make this side fin over here, we will be making it much in the same way as the top fin. The only difference is that all the bands that we will be using will be single bands. So let's make that. A single black, a single gray, and a single gray. A single black, a single gray, and a single gray. And then a single black and a single gray. And we will cap it with a capping band, loop 4 times, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we will hold them together with horizontal bands, double looped. Another horizontal band, double looped. And then we will loop the bands like we did with the other pieces. And there you have it, our side fin. Now that we have our tail and our fins ready, we will start to work on the main body. We will be using double bands for this entire layout. So we start with white double bands, and then gray double bands, and then another gray double bands, and then we put 2 white bands, 2 gray bands and another 2 gray bands, and we will repeat that all the way to the end of the loom. And now for this bottom part, we put 2 grays, another 2 grays, and then our white double band will be in a diagonal from this pin to that pin. And then our double white bands will be in a diagonal from this bottom pin to this second pin over here. And then we have a gray, 2 gray bands here. So that will form this really narrow part of the tail end of the shark in our piece. So we are done placing the vertical bands. You might want to pause the video and check to see if you have the same layout. Now we are ready to place our horizontal bands, and this is where we define the shape of our shark, where there are areas that are narrower and there are areas that are wider, and we do that with the horizontal bands. We will be placing bands with more tension on the narrower portions and bands with lesser tension on the areas that are wider. Let's see how that goes. For the front part of the shark, we're using double looped bands. So twist and then loop to itself, a double loop band. Then we do another double loop band, and then we place what I call a 1.5 loop. That is a single band that is first placed as a single band on the 3 pins in a row, but then we twist it and then we put it on the 2 pins on this side. So it's 1.5 looping, and we do that 2 more times. 1 and 2. You twist it here and then you loop it to these 2 pins. So 1.5. And then because this is the wider section, we are using just the single bands, no looping. And there are 3 rows of those single bands. And then we do another 1.5. Twist it and then loop it to these 2 pins. And then for the remaining rows, we use the double looped bands. Okay, so that is the placement for the horizontal bands that define the shape of our piece. Narrower areas have tighter bands, that's why we have double looped bands, and then wider areas have tighter bands, that's why we use the single bands. So check your work and see if you have the same layout. So we have this as a double loop, a double loop, a 1.5, a 1.5, a 1.5, a single, 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 a 1.5, a double, and a double. Make sure you have that same layout. Now we are ready to attach the tail and the fins to our project. We secured this with a toothpick earlier. Now we replace that with a hook, so it'll be easier for us to place onto the loom. Okay. Place it here like you're placing the shoe for the action figure. Okay. Now for the top fin, it'll be easier when the loom is horizontal, and you count 6 pins from this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I usually put a toothpick in here just to remember that that is the 6th pin. And then carefully take out the toothpicks one at a time from your top fin. The black band on the left side, it's up to you whether you want to use your fingers to pinch and put it this way. But I find it easier to use a hook. Just get a hook, then place the end loops. Okay, so just like like how we attach the arms to our action figure, we attach the fin, the top fin, this time. And here is something different that I did with the side fin. Instead of attaching it to the outer pins in here, just for more 3D-ish form, I put it on the middle pin. So what you do with that is since you make it face this way, and you count 4 pins from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, or from the left in this case. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, mark that position with a toothpick just so you don't forget where it's at. And then, like we did with the top fin, one at a time, replace the toothpicks with a hook and then attach it to the pin. Go 1. Then take that toothpick out of the second gray loop, replace it with a hook, place it on the next pin, and carefully take out the toothpick, insert your hook on that black loop and place it on this pin over here. So make sure that it is not twisted. It's pointing downwards and the top fin is pointing upwards. Now let's loop our bands to finish this project. We dig out the pair on top, and this time it's the gray, and then loop it to its forward pin. Okay, I dug it out of this tail, this pin, and put it on this loop, on this pin over here. Now dig out the the white pair of bands, and then loop it to this forward pin over here, and dig out this pair, put it to the forward pin, dig this, whichever's on top is the white, and put it there, and then okay, and then these bands over here is just like a double triple. Now when we get to where the top fin is, it's just like looping the bands where the arms are at in the action figure. Just loop the bands onto the forward pin, dig all the way to the bottom of this layer of bands, dig for this pair, wiggle it out a bit, and then put it on this forward pin over here. Okay. In the same way, we're digging for this bands now. They're the ones on the bottom. Just dig all the way into there, take it out, wiggle it out a bit, and then loop it to the forward pin. And then we're digging for this. Take it out, loop it to, and you could loop this pin, this bands all the way to the top. Now for the side fin, we first loop the bands before we get to it. Here, up to here, and then get the side fin a little bit out of the way and loop these white bands. You can go all the way to the top when you do this. Okay, now put it back and then loop these bands. You have to dig for this band in the bottom, all the way to the bottom of the layers. Dig it out and loop it. Dig to the bottom of these layers, loop it, and then you go all the way to the top. Okay, then when you get to the top part, what you need to do is loop this once into the diagonals to here, the other diagonal to here, and then the last one in the middle to here. And we are done with the looping for this project. Make sure everything has been looped. Make sure you haven't missed any of the rows. Make sure the bands are all being held together. Okay, you might want to pause the video and check to see if you have the same layout. Then all you need to do is get a band and secure these top loops with a single band. You don't need a C-clip for this. Just loop the band onto itself. Okay. And then take the piece out of the loom. And then you just stretch out the bands so the vertical bands will do their thing, pulling your band into shape. Stretch it out, stretch it out. Until you get the shape that you want. Now for the gill slits on the side of the shark, what I do is just I cut up a black band, and then I just thread that black band 3 times onto these loops over here to form the gill slits. And it'll be easier to use a finer crochet hook for this, because you're going into these loops over here. The regular hook will still work, but I just find it more convenient to use a finer crochet hook. So all you need to do is to insert your hook onto these loops over here, and then get your black cut up band into it. There you go. Okay. And then hold on to this end over here with your left forefinger, and then insert the hook to this side. Get your band and get it in there. Okay? And then insert your hook again to get the band from the back. Okay, get it from the back. Pull it back out to the front. And then again, you insert your hook to this section over here. Pull your black band in again. Okay. That is gill slit number 2. And then put your hook into this loops. Pull out your black band to the front again. Okay. And then insert your hook onto this section over here. You just find the best place that you could insert your hook into, so you have a good spacing for the gill slits, and then you pull in your black band again in, and that would be gill slit number 3. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. We have 3 gill slits, and just leave the ends here for now, because we will be using these ends to secure the eye. For the eye, I just take a a single band and I tie a knot. Stretch it out a bit to make it easier to handle. You tie a knot. It might be easier to use a hook. You tie a knot. With the band, and then you do that one more time. Tie a knot. There. The knot that you form actually becomes the eye, and you will just place that wherever you want the eye to be in. Probably this section over here. It could be held together by these horizontal bands on the inside. So insert your hook to wherever you want the eye to be, and then get the first loop in. Okay. And it gets out of the back. And then insert your loop again on another into another loop this time. I'll explain that later. And then you take it out, and then you pull back the other loop in. Okay. The reason why you have to make sure that there are bands holding on to your eyes is so if ever you want, a child would want to play with the action figure, even if they pull and stretch the bands, the eye won't be pulled out of shape. It won't be. There's something holding on to it, even if they stretch the piece out. And then remember those end of the bands for the slits. We use that to secure the loops. For the eyes. Okay, just thread that in there. Thread that in there. Okay. Then you have the two ends. Just tie a knot to make sure they're secure. Do it several times. Okay. It might not be a good idea to cut these ends, just to keep them neat. You could tuck them in to one of these loops so they're not showing from the front. Just tuck them into the loops as neatly as you can. Okay. So we pull out the eye. That's it. And then just fine tune the shape. Fine tune the gill slits. Okay. Stretch it out, stretch it out. You can see, even if we stretch it out, even if kids play with it, it retains its shape, it retains its features. So there you have it. You have completed the shark charm on the Rainbow Loom. And you have also learned the very important technique of defining the shape of your piece, using the horizontal bands to make the areas narrower or wider as needed in your design. I hope you have fun making your own action figures. Happy looming!